My name is Micah John Del DeShazer, he, him. I work in the theater industry here in Ottawa. I collaborated with institutions like GCTC, NAC. I sit on the board at Orpheus Musical Theater, and I'm a freelance director and arts administrator. And yeah, my key takeaway from today, we're really just distilling what it means to unpack volunteerism, especially in governance. I think my big takeaway was like, how do we create continuity in the sector while maintaining a really solid foundation, a good structure? You know, I think we are really trying to get down to why people volunteer, and at the end of it, it really feels like it's personal. A lot of the buy-in is either a lived experience or something adjacent, someone in your life that has that lived experience. And I think the good thing about the arts is that everyone has something adjacent to the arts that's personal to them. So I think it's really just tapping into that to help us reinvigorate the arts volunteer world.
I'm starting our chat today really thinking about volunteerism more broadly than just the governance space, but obviously recognizing that all those folks who are leading on boards and on this board will be volunteers as well, so fitting them into that landscape. For those of you who aren't familiar with Volunteer Ottawa, we're your local volunteer center. We support over 300 nonprofit and charitable organizations in the city and around the city with access to folks who are interested in engaging in volunteering. We're really fortunate that recently the Ontario Nonprofit Network was able to collect some really rich data, specifically on Ontario nonprofits, but we could dig down and look at the Ottawa-based data to tell us the story of what's happening in volunteerism in the city. So we know that 48% are reporting difficulty recruiting and retaining volunteers. I'm sure that's true for a lot of folks in the room. And 51% are reporting a lack of dedicated resources for volunteer recruitment and management. Folks are not volunteering in the same way that they used to. People are not giving their time or their money in the same way that they used to. And I know we all know this, but we're not doing well. Layering on to the volunteer crisis and the HR crisis, we know that folks are struggling when it comes to finances. 48% are reporting stagnant or declining revenues, and 27% expect their finances to worsen in the coming years. There's even more data points here relating to folks digging into reserves, folks no longer having reserves, folks having only a couple of months left. So really thinking about, and again, recognizing who's in the space, the amount of pressure that's putting on all of us when we talk about this conversation when it comes to volunteerism and governance. And then of course, there's an even bigger demand for services. 80% report an increased demand for services. So I think we expected in that period coming out of COVID that maybe this would dissipate, but of course, all of the different pieces of the puzzle that are putting pressure on individuals are coming to us when it comes to services. So I bring these three big points up because if anything, these are things that are going to affect our ability to engage volunteers in a thoughtful way, because we're all under pressure. The folks who are running organizations, the people who are giving their time, everyone's under a lot of pressure. And we have seen that the intensity of the crisis has slowed since COVID, but it's still not back to where it was before. I recently was speaking to one of the volunteer managers at Bruyere. They had 600 volunteers before COVID and are only at 300 right now. Yeah. So if that's anything, when we know that hospitals are one of the organizations who tend to be really successful in engaging volunteers, they're a very traditional model of volunteerism. Folks really tend to gravitate towards those, and they're struggling to find volunteers. I think that really paints a staggering picture of what we're facing. We know that older adults haven't come back to volunteering in the same way, but we also know the folks who are starting to age into that older adult category are not engaging in volunteering in the same way. Folks have different priorities now. People who maybe didn't need to care for their grandchildren before are caring for their grandchildren now because parents can't afford to send them to daycare. All these little ripple effects that are changing the way folks engage with volunteering. Young adults are not engaging in volunteering as much as they used to. We saw during COVID the likes of things like the 40 hours that Ontario high school students need to achieve in order to get their high school diploma. That got cut down, so folks weren't engaging in the same way as they used to, and we've seen the ripple effects of that, alongside the recognition that folks are a lot more isolated, a lot more polarized and feeling excluded. Young people are not feeling as comfortable engaging in the ways that they used to. We need to change, and this is on all levels. I often am speaking about volunteerism more broadly, the boots on the ground style volunteering, rather than just governance, but all of these pieces are relevant. Finding opportunities to be more flexible and more inclusive are really important, and we're seeing this in small ways already. The likes of hybrid and virtual volunteering, episodic volunteerism, the likes of honorariums, that opportunity to offer folks a little bit of something to account for the fact that actually volunteerism costs money. Before I joined Volunteer Ottawa, I was living in Ireland in Dublin, and I worked for an organization called Food Cloud. And they were really, really successful in leveraging corporate volunteers, and not just in a way to pack boxes. We were a food bank, but also to leverage their skills when it came to things like accounting, to AI, how we could actually bring those folks in on a regular basis and have them help us with higher level operations rather than just those traditional tasks that you would expect a corporate volunteer to do in 6 hours. So finding different ways to leverage those skills, I think is a really great way for us to unlock opportunity. And then finally, investment. I think, unfortunately, we do need more money to do all of these things. I think often when we speak about volunteerism, we see it as free. And the reality of that is you need to be able to invest in volunteerism for it to work for you. We know that the most successful volunteer programs are programs that have a dedicated member of staff to run those programs. And when it becomes a side of the desk project, unfortunately, there's not going to be a level of engagement that is going to be fulfilling for the volunteer, but also for your program. So finding ways to think about that is really important.
I am not a subject matter expert when it comes to volunteerism. I just want to throw that out there right now. I'm not bringing you sort of data-driven or research-based insights. I'm bringing you the project-level experience. I am the chair of the board of directors of an artist housing project that is actively being built a couple, neighborhoods away. The organization that's bringing this to life is called PAL Ottawa. We're one of several chapters across the country that are actively building artist housing and share a sort of common vision around that and common challenges, which I'll get to. We are now collaborating with Ottawa Community Housing. So we are essentially being given right of first offer on a block of housing units, affordable units for artists within the context of a larger affordable housing development project at PAL Ottawa. As of now, an entirely volunteer-run enterprise. What I want to focus on today is sort of some of the nuances of that volunteer experience in navigating a relatively complex infrastructure project and what kind of expertise you need at the table to realize that. Some of the challenges that we're facing that Nadine laid out, and I'm so grateful for the work that you do and the research that you provide to sort of point to some of the challenges we're facing that we don't really know how to express. There are systemic challenges and issues, and I think compound on top of that some of the systemic challenges we face in the arts more broadly, right? When we look at compounding crises, the arts is obviously is often the first thing to get cut, right? Like this may be a crisis, but next to the housing crisis or next to the affordability crisis or the loneliness crisis, like this one's got to go. Like we can't focus on that one, right? And so we in the arts are constantly, and I think it makes us resilient, but we're constantly having to think outside of the box of how we stay alive in the context of these other things that are constantly crowding in. But all of this is happening now in my personal context, which I know I keep bringing myself into it, but I think I'm a bit of an interesting case study in what we maybe need to fix. Which is, here I am, I started as an artist. I then had to start working full time because that wasn't bringing in enough revenue for our family. Then I was volunteering for PAL and didn't want to let that go because I was passionate about it. Felt like a really important long-term vision for our city, something to really get behind that's concrete, that our arts ecosystem needs as a proof of concept. That's the language you use. This project is proof of concept that the arts can operate with other sectors competently and hold space and be able to really work well collaboratively with other sectors. But here I am. I'm now working full time. I have 3 small kids. I'm an artist, quote unquote, but at this point really not working as an artist at all, because all the buffer time that I have, I'm giving to PAL Ottawa, which I recognize the importance of that in personal investment from my side of things. But I was coming up against this real-time dilemma of, am I even still an artist? Because I'm no longer actually actively working as a professional artist, not in a meaningful way. In our policies, and sort of echoed in our bylaws to a lighter degree, we need to have on our board professional artists. And I think fundamentally that's important. And it ties into sort of one of my points that I am eventually going to arrive at. We have a policy that we pay artists whenever they're involved in events or initiatives, but we don't have a dedicated pool to pay the expertise at the board level. And this is really challenging because what happens is we bring artists on in a somewhat tokenizing fashion, don't invest in their professional development, and then expect them to sit in a room with representatives from 3 other sectors that they have no real framework of understanding of how to talk to, let alone be persuasive in their messaging to these sector heads. And so we put them in really compromising positions. We put them in charge of complex infrastructure projects that require a ton of coordination. And then we put them on boards with necessarily, and I love these people, God bless these people, but retired architects, retired accountants, retired lawyers, retired senior bureaucrats who are vehement about the project, thank goodness, but also can really side rail the focus of the project being on that lived experience component. When you get these powerful voices in the room who, thank goodness in the arts sector, we have these people who want to give tons of time and tons of money. And it's, I guess, sort of the legacy of the patronage model that we still have this, and we're lucky to have it. But we're also unlucky to have it in the sense that it's harder for us to self-determine where we want the arts to go, what we want the arts to look like. And so we need artists who are invested in professionally to be able to competently enter housing services, enter the food security discussion, enter the health system discussions, and know what they're talking about and understand the talking points on the other side and be able to clearly lay out the connection from the arts perspective, so that we dismantle this notion that artists are living in their own little universe and don't know what's going on around them, which is not true. I think the leadership table model, and Katie's here, and I'm teeing things up for you, is a really important structure, and it sounds like that's what you as a community, or we as a community, are working towards, which is let's find these artists who are able to inhabit these other sectors and bring forward a compelling message that lines up with the plans or policies that exist in those other environments, and then call on that sort of centralized advisory body to support these smaller initiatives so that we are not having to do it on our own as little boards with no staff.
Yeah, so I'm Katie. I'm the Executive Director of the Ottawa Alliance to End Homelessness, and we are a membership organization. So we represent about 75 agencies in the Ottawa sector who all provide services for people experiencing homelessness and housing precarity. Traditionally, we've done mostly advocacy work, and increasingly we're moving into what I think Arts Ottawa is moving into, like a collective approach to seeing good work happen towards reducing homelessness. Obviously, it's a different vision that you have, but equally important, I think, is the structure of how we get there. And so, like, Leah, thank you for teeing me up. So lovely. And Leah also has worked on a lot of pieces that have actually been quite integral to the work we're doing now, with having lived expertise at the table, but lived expertise at the table in a serious way, a paid way, a professional way. And I'm starting to use the language of user design, because that lands with different groups. It lands more in the private sector, and people understanding like, oh, of course user design. Of course we have to do testing to make sure that a program or a product or a service actually works for humans. And you notice the difference when you use a product or a service and you're like, no human actually did this. Or they did, but they didn't test it. So I guess the Alliance, my first day actually at the Alliance was March 16th, 2020. So super great day to start work. And we have only ever had one staff. We're now a 15-year-old organization, but have been around as just a steering committee, et cetera, since the late 90s, of a small group of like committed advocates and organizations who were like, we need a bigger voice at City Hall. But in that time, COVID actually presented some opportunities for funding, which really made a difference to kind of get us kickstarted. And one of the things right from the get-go that we wanted to move towards was, yes, the Alliance does advocacy, but we actually now need to do advocacy where we're not just banging on the windows, being mad about how we're not seeing success in reducing homelessness. We need to be at the table in a serious way, equal players with people who have power and people who have money. And so what we wanted to do was move towards what we're calling system planning, but sort of coordinating the sector to go towards a common goal of reducing homelessness. And the first big step is governance. And really, when we started to build out what that would look like, I thought it'd be so fast. I thought by the end of 2020, we'd have a beautiful governance table that would encompass the whole sector. We just started officially. It's been like 3.5 years of development, but we've also built a lot of trust in that 3.5 years of development. So I'll start with the broader governance structure and then kind of move into the lived expertise component of that. So basically, I mean, for those who sort of have been in the sector, if you've had any intersections with the homelessness housing sector, really siloed, really complex, and agencies that are all serving the same person, but there's no kind of communication between them. Ottawa's really collaborative and like a very wanting to partner, but collaboration is not coordination. And so you need somebody to come in and help do that coordination work and sort of the grunt work of coordination. And I'm gonna just give a teaser because it shows how effective you can be. I don't know what the arts version of this is, but I suspect it means recognition, more funding, more opportunity to profile artists, impact. But the homelessness version is actually reducing homelessness. And I'll give you an example of Edmonton. There's a community agency called Homeward Trust. They are doing what we want to do. They have coordinated over 60 agencies. They have one giant database. And I used to work for the feds in their homelessness program. And we got to go visit Edmonton in this Homeward Trust. And they had a database of 1,700 people receiving a particular kind of service, over 60 agencies. Those agencies said, we're burning out. You know, everyone we're working with has really complex needs. Like, we need lots more resourcing. What are we going to do? And when they looked at their data, 1,700 people, they had 12 people who were absolutely burning out the system. And that number bears out with a lot of situations. And then they were able to like robustly surround those individuals with the right services, but it was only because they were working together in a very coordinated way with common data, with common vision, and a common focus on our job is to end homelessness. Our job is to support individuals as effectively as we can to either not become homeless in the first place or get them housed as soon as humanly possible. So that's our North Star. We want to end homelessness. I think we are going to, and we're going to see big reductions. It's going to take a lot of time, but other communities have done it. So that's sort of where we've realized we need a governance structure that reflects the many sectors within the sector. So you've got health at the table, you've got education, you've got shelters, you've got supportive housing, nonprofit housing, social housing, all those different folks who are really critical to supporting people, but aren't usually around a table, except they're at 1,000 tables. And I don't know if this is your experience, but we actually have mapped now. So we've created like the superstructure table that's going to be kind of holding the vision and setting the big picture targets. And we've mapped 50 tables that are working groups or doing this work in some way. And a lot of people are like, I'm at 20 of those damn tables, and I don't want to be at 20 of those tables having the same conversation about the same thing, about the same people. And you know who's never in the room? People with lived experience, people who have to navigate that system, and people who are trying to get housing, people who are trying to survive. And so there's another dynamic in the homelessness sector where lived experience work has been super tokenizing, but in a way that is actively harmful. And that way has been, hi, I'm a person with lived experience. I'm going to now tell you my trauma. And what happens in that moment is, first of all, it's a reflection of the sector, which is literally, I have to retell my story because you guys are not coordinated everywhere I go. And as I retell my story, I have to do it to get resources. And I also have to do it in a way that usually people disassociate. Like they're just so like, here's all my trauma. Can you please get me bus tickets? Like that is how our system is designed. We want to and will fix that. And we know of communities that are fixing that actively. So that dynamic plays out also when people are like pulled in and like, hey, can you give a talk on your trauma? Can you do that? And the thing that happens in that moment is the person has had to do something that is not psychologically safe for them. They're also so used to it, which is also like really screwed up. And on top of that, you have a room of people who are not in a trusted relationship with that person, who also can't emotionally react. Like they're like, the room is held hostage and nobody knows what to say and nobody knows what to do. And it doesn't pull us back to problem solving, and it doesn't pull us back to the big picture. And the big picture is making sure that no more people have to go through that experience, and that we also don't reinforce that experience by playing it out in a public setting. So when we sort of got into this work, we sort of rebranded and focused on like, what are our core values? I love a good rebrand where you can strip down your values to 3. I love anything that you can strip down to 3 because nobody can remember anything beyond that. And equity is one of ours, where our focus is we center those affected by homelessness in the work that we do. And so what that led to was basically having a team of people with lived experience who are on staff as professionals. So our hiring process had to be like completely redone. Like, what does that actually look like? Because people have different sorts of skill sets. So yes, you have lived expertise in a particular area, but we also need to both train you and support you to be in rooms with people who are professionals, who are EDs, who are et cetera. The work is not peer support. It's not that frontline thing, which a lot of folks do who have come from lived experience. But the work is really, you have expertise in an area. You also have other skills like teamwork, like a great collaborator, like being able to, some people do public speaking. So really reframing what skills we're looking for, and that we are looking for skills. You know, user design or understanding the system is content expertise. That is one skill. We want you to have a variety of skills. So we want to get away from that sort of tokenizing. You have one thing that we want, which is really gross and extractive. And we really want to leverage all of the skills you bring. So this team focuses on facilitation. They do program design. They do consultation work. They do public speaking, but they do panels. And we try and make really clear their job is not telling their story / don't ask them to tell their story. We've professionalized it in having an MOU where expectations are super clear of what people are going to say or not say and do. And it's interesting, the power of no is really interesting in this context. So if there is an engagement or an organization reaches out and they're like, we want to do this thing, and we're like, cool. It's not ethical. We're going to say no to that, even though that's money on the table. But we're actually going to say no because it's not, we need to help reteach the sector how to do this well.
I really want to thank Arts Ottawa for getting us here together. I work with stories, and I think it's always very valuable to start from stories, to start learning from each other and to listen to each other. I come from a little bit of a smaller organization, and I come from a world of smaller organizations, I think. So I guess I come from what we call in the Netherlands, where I'm from, more of the bottom-up approach of how we work. We work with grassroots organizations, with people that stand up from the city themselves and make something happen. Who considers themselves a volunteer in this room? Who has at some point given their time away for free, basically? That's what it comes down to. Yeah, it's me too, actually. That's I think everyone in this room. That is part of where I want to go with this story today, is that I'd like for you to think about is why do you do that? What is the reasoning behind that you actually give your time to a certain organization? It could be in whatever kind of extent you're thinking. Like, it could be small, it could be big, it could be whatever that we do. Department 613 has been around for the past 15 years in the city. It's an organization for local community coverage on arts and culture. So what's happening in the city is actually written down by only volunteers. We have had some paid writers in the past, but that has been really project-based. So that means we kind of follow the direction of the volunteer in what we need to cover. I have very much a research background, and I think that still shines through in the work that I do. I studied arts and culture studies, which is a very sociological approach to why do we value arts, what is important to us, what does it bring to us. And value is a very broad definition. Like, it can be economic value, it can be social value, it can be community value, there's so many values to attach to that. And actually my first thesis was about the value of participation from city residents for cultural organizations, which is actually interesting in the setting that we are here right now. And that was my first toe dipping into this field of volunteerism, I think. And after that I was more intrigued by, okay, but if we have these volunteers and this participation is important, then how do cities actually function? So I continued with urban sociology and what is the role of arts and culture in defining a city's identity, for example. I actually wrote my master's thesis on one of the first European research. I was able to participate in that, about the 100 Resilient Cities program by the Rockefeller Foundation, on a case study of 2 neighborhoods within Rotterdam who were trying to boost resiliency in those neighborhoods by working through co-creation. So co-creation as in a collaboration between public, private, and the city residents, which is a relatively new approach. It's happening right here. Like, this is all part of these processes. And I always love to hear when people are at different stages through these processes, because I've got to interview a lot of people about this from a research perspective, but later from my life. I've always combined research with my work, because I find it very valuable to have a hands-on approach towards, if we have this research, what do we do with it? Where does it land? How do we put it into practical action, basically? And I think that's a very important part of a learning process. Is not just the learning and the listening, but what comes after that? How do we continue? How do we keep those conversations going? So I learned a lot from these interviews, and I think that's where my love for stories came from as well. Like, what happens if we actively try to listen? Not just to other arts organizations, like that is a very, very important part. We learn from each other, we connect on that. But if we listen to all these other parties that are at play in the city, because many people we don't actually reach, it's very difficult to reach them. And I was happy to hear the first session that was organized here that revolved a little bit more about trust, for example, and trust from people towards institutions. And I think that's a very big part of it. So it's great to open up your space and invite people in. But if there's a lack of trust in a way, is that enough? Like, that is the question that I ask myself. And I guess from that research and from those interviews, and I've interviewed like the bigger institutions and the very young grassroots organizations that are still shaping those institutions in a way. And I've interviewed many people from the neighborhoods, some of them in very, very vulnerable positions, and I recognize your story a little bit in that, is that what does it take to work with volunteers, and why does it seem to be so difficult to engage people? Like, why do we not get to that point in a way? And I'd like you to go back to that question I asked you before: is why do you volunteer? And I think that says something. Your answer, and that's your answer. There might be some overlap between the people that are in this room, but it's your answer that says something about your idea of probably a feeling and an idea of belonging to a place and being part of something bigger and supporting a certain mission or supporting a certain community. And I think, in a sense, if you look at volunteering like that, you carry a massive responsibility as organizations toward your volunteers. I would say your volunteers are not there for you only. They're not only there to help you, but you are there in its essence to follow your volunteers in their desires. And I think especially for an organization like Apartment 613, that's how it works.
A certain fluidity to like creatively driven enterprise that is sort of like somehow magically existing outside of capitalism in a way that like housing does not. So, and I think a lot of other sectors do not. And so I think part of the challenge is that we as an arts community need to understand how we operate in capitalism and then like professionally articulate our place in it in a way that makes sense to us and honors the way that we are, the leadership style that we bring, the way that we galvanize community, and how important that is to be publicly facing about that process. So like, here's what we bring, y'all. Right? But still be realistic about the fact that we exist in a capitalist environment and that $75 for a gig is not enough and is not representative of the value that we're bringing. But we need to do a better job as an arts community in demonstrating that in all those like data-driven, evidence-based, research-founded ways that I'm not discrediting those systems, but they're not all there is to demonstrate value. You articulated that so beautifully. And in our conversation, there's so much richness in those stories, in the way that you work. And want to invite that story forward because I think it fits so beautifully in what we're talking about. But we have to figure out how to straddle that line and then invite others to straddle it with us, because as long as those other sectors sit very firmly and they're sort of, this is the way things work, this is how we regulate, these are the policies and procedures, if you're outside of that, you got to come on our side. I think we as the arts community need to do a better job of stepping in and saying no, and here's why no. Learning the no, right? Or I think you were the one who said learning. Yeah. Anyway, we all are having to learn how to say no, actually, or maybe in the improv sensibilities, yes and, yes and here's the extra that we bring for you. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's getting to it in a way that often we do a discredit to ourselves when we enter these spaces. And so I feel so sad saying it when we enter these spaces and we say, but look at how beautiful the arts are. And people are like, and that's a bad choice of profession. That's often the reaction I get is like, why would we prioritize artists? They've chosen this for themselves. Not seeing the systemic contributors that make it that way, that there's a lack of understanding of the value of how we work and what we bring and why it should be integrated into the system, not set apart. I think the Artists in Government program is so good. Like, I think that is an example of a way in which we are actively demonstrating value in the context of a different sector and teaching those other sectors how to understand the way that the arts show up.
I think we sometimes in the nonprofit sector are a little bit behind when it comes to the use of technology and like making processes more efficient, especially because, especially here, a lot of organizations are really old and have old ways of doing things, which have worked. I think COVID, for all its faults, brought us this moment where we've really had to rethink how we engage volunteers and had to shake things up, because in a lot of places and spaces, those traditional recruitment methods of asking your friend to come along or meeting someone at an event weren't working in the same way. So I think we have a lot of potential. There's a lot of volunteer management software opportunities available now, and they're becoming more and more affordable as the marketplace gets more crowded, which really allow folks to utilize or engage with volunteering in a way that we see being really efficient. So at Volunteer Ottawa, we have our own volunteers. It's very confusing. We use volunteer a lot, but we engage volunteers who go out and speak to the community about volunteerism and remind them of the benefits. And in order to, it's a small group, it's 20 people. We utilize a volunteer management system that allows them to sign up on their own. It all is happening without my interaction, which is great, but also I'm so happy that I don't have to send loads of emails back and forth or make phone calls to ensure that someone's available when I need them to be available, and I actually need you to pick up this thing, but this thing is in the office. Like that ends up taking up so much time, we all know, and it's important work, but it doesn't move the needle on the bigger pieces. So when I can rely on a technology that is relatively affordable, it's only $30 a month, to be able to do that, I'm gonna say yes. But it takes away those opportunities to listen, to connect, to grow. So I think there is a lot of space for it, and I think there is a lot of opportunity, especially in really big programs. But I'm always a little like, I'm kind of scared of it, which is crazy. I am a bit scared of it, and I also recognize the barriers that it creates for folks who don't want to engage in volunteerism in that way, or are used to engaging in volunteerism and again, I think we're talking about formal volunteerism here, but who aren't used to that, and I think in a lot of cases it turns folks away, or it means that they don't even give themselves the chance to engage with it, which I worry about. So I think there's lots of opportunity, and there's a lot of great ways to utilize it. I'm still trying to navigate the best way to ensure that we're still building those connections and coming back to the whys, right? I'm seeing this moment of inflection in volunteerism where, and I think technology plays a piece of this, is are we moving into this really transactional way of volunteering, which helps move us forward, but does it take away from that like original goal of what we're doing, which is just I want to support and build community and that sort of thing.
I very much agree with what is being said here. Like I think this is one of the major conversations we should have. So I'm so happy that you brought it up, because I don't think we didn't tap into it before that. I understand your point of working with a small organization and having the need to stabilize some of your efforts that you do and give back to your community. I've interviewed a lot of people from vulnerable communities as well, and it was always one of the questions, like if you want to provide space for them to build on that story, if they want to, like that is a very important question. Maybe I didn't tap into that earlier, but if you want to empower yourself through that story, then how can we provide you with the resources, and money is one of them. So what we do in the Netherlands, we do have ideas for this as well. So and do have ways of working around this, but it very much belongs to the organization in deciding whether they want to give financial resources to their volunteers. I think it could be a great way to not put too much pressure on people but still have a little bit more of a conversation around what are the tasks and responsibilities, and to what extent do you want to continue them for your organization. So I do agree that it's a funding question in many ways. Like, if we apply for funding, is it possible to put in a little bit of budget in your funding application and say, hey, I would love to pay some of our people, like they're not around all the time, but they do a lot, they're consistent for our organization. I think in the Netherlands we have this system where you pay, I think, for something an hour up to a maximum of 210 euros per person per month who contributes to your organization. So there is a cap of what you can pay to your, don't quote me on the exact numbers, but it's somewhere around there. And it's tax-free money, so you don't pay any taxes over it. It's for you. It's you don't need to give anything to someone else. So it's not a lot of money, but like especially from people who are from marginalized communities, for example, and are putting a lot of effort into already surviving and making sure that they go by day to day with the resources that they have, it can be this extra tipping point that leads you to do something nice with your family or to do something extra. And I think there are many people out there who do have the resources themselves and say, I would happily give that time, but I would really love to pay the people that are putting in already extra efforts on top of their lives and wanting to contribute in a way, but need some extra resources for that. So I do think there's a big funding question, I think, on who will give you that funding. I would love to come up with a model where you have this combined way of working, where you have your own revenue streams of income, and you have this funding and what goes to what, and where do you put that money into. But I think it's a very important question to have.